Brandon Miller. Want to talk about this. You're probably not going to hear anybody else discuss this angle. Ja Morant over the weekend went out and flashed a gun on Instagram from inside of a nightclub. Really poor decision by Ja Morant because he was in the news and the Washington Post, as I read to you, with an allegation that he got into a fight with a 17-year-old and showed a gun, with the allegation that the Indiana Pacers said that someone had pulled a gun on them after the game in the sort of bowels of FedEx Forum. And then Ja Morant reacts to this by going out and posting an Instagram video holding a gun. He's currently off the team, trying to get his mind right, according to statements that have been made. He's out for at least 2 games, probably longer. And what I thought was interesting about this is the Memphis Grizzlies responded to Ja Morant flashing a gun in an Instagram video in conjunction with his other behavior more aggressively than the Alabama Crimson Tide did to Brandon Miller for driving a gun to a murder scene that led to the murder of a mom. And these are undisputed facts. I understand that a lot of people out there in sports media, frankly, are not very smart and lack the intellectual ability to even consider a criminal charge. But in Brandon Miller's attorney's own statement, he doesn't dispute that he knew the gun was in the car, and he doesn't dispute that he received a text message letting him know that his teammate wanted that gun because they were in a confrontation. So I just want all of you to sit there and think for a minute, how is it that the NBA's Memphis Grizzlies, which have a CBA and deal with professional athletes, were more difficult with Ja Morant for flashing a gun than the Alabama Crimson Tide were with Brandon Miller for actually delivering a murder weapon to the murder scene and allowing a murder to take place? It's backwards, right? Because Brandon Miller is just a college kid, and all he's doing is getting the opportunity as a privilege to be a scholarship athlete at the University of Alabama. We know students get suspended all the time, whether they're athletes or not, for relatively inconsequential behavioral violations. In fact, if you have played sports before, you probably have been on a team, maybe it was you, where somebody got suspended for not having high enough grades, for not going to class, for talking back to a coach, for just misbehavior that is nowhere near criminal in nature. So the Grizz say they're so concerned about Ja Morant that they are suspending him effectively from the team while he tries to learn from his misbehavior. Alabama does nothing to Brandon Miller, despite Brandon Miller engaging in behavior that's far worse than what Ja Morant did, right? Brandon Miller didn't just show up on an Instagram Live flashing a gun. He wasn't accused of flashing a gun before. He actually delivered a loaded murder weapon to the scene of a murder that was used to kill a mom. And what I love here is there are definitely a bunch of Alabama fans that actually overlap as Memphis Grizzly fans. And I love their brains exploding as they try to justify the way that the Memphis Grizzlies have responded while simultaneously defending what the Alabama Crimson Tide have done. Here is what I think is the big picture. The Grizz actually seem concerned about Ja Morant's decision-making going forward because he's a linchpin of their franchise, right? Whereas Alabama doesn't really care that much about Brandon Miller. They're just using him because he's leaving in 3 weeks, and then he'll never have anything to do with the University of Alabama ever again. So it's an interesting dichotomy here. Think about it. The college, which supposedly exists to grow boys into men, right, is less concerned with the behavior of a player than the NBA franchise, which exists to make money for its professional sports team's owner. Really interesting. The investment opportunity here, the Grizz are more invested in Ja Morant's growth as a human than Alabama Crimson Tide is in the growth of Brandon Miller as a human. I think it's really interesting to think about because in general you would expect the opposite, right? You would expect the university, which is in the goal, the entire purpose of a university is to educate young minds and develop adults, whereas the goal of the Grizz is just to make money, yet the Grizz are more stringent in their expectations of Ja Morant than the University of Alabama is for Brandon Miller. I think it's backwards. I think the Grizz are responding appropriately here, but I think it evidences how much Alabama's behavior is utterly indefensible based on the undisputed facts of these situations.